Hey, brothers and sisters, good morning. Good to be with you. And this morning, we're going to take a look at a section of Mark's Gospel, Mark chapter 7, beginning at verse 24, where Mark gives us an account of Jesus healing a woman's daughter of an evil spirit. And a couple of things right before we dig into the text in Mark chapter 7. Jesus has, right before this section, had a conversation with religious leaders about what's clean and what's unclean. Before God, what's clean, what's unclean. As we think about who we are, what defines clean and unclean, righteous and unrighteous before God? And Jesus, in a section right before this, in the Gospel of Mark, he quotes Isaiah from the Old Testament. Jesus says, Isaiah was right about you when he prophesied about you hypocrites. Goes right at him. He says, as it is written in Isaiah, these people, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain, that is, it's empty. Their teachings are but rules taught by men. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to the traditions of men. And so as Jesus is having a conversation with religious people of the day, kind of talking about what defines clean and unclean, he's reminding us that we human beings, we often look at the outside of things for value, for cleanness, for rightness before God even. But that's not how God looks at us. God looks at what's inside. God looks at the heart. And so Jesus has just had a conversation about this immediately before the section we're taking a look at. A couple background notes as we dig into Mark chapter 7, just some things that were true of the culture at that time. You're going to hear in this account with this woman descriptive terms of the area, the time, the culture. You're going to hear Tyre, Sidon, Greek, Syrian, Phoenicia. You're going to hear all of those terms. And what you'd be hearing is, if you were a religious insider of the day, you would have been hearing outsider, 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 someone who's not welcome, not belong, doesn't belong to the community. And so when you hear that, that's what we should be hearing. There was also kind of a second note before we dig in. There were religious healers and mystics of the day in the Greco-Roman culture. There were spiritualists, there were mediums, there were healers, not sort of within sort of Christianity, not within the God-fearing religion of the day, but kind of these pagan ones. And they were often public spectacles on display about themselves, having to prove themselves to the community that they had these powers to heal, to tell futures, to connect with spirits. That was sort of what this woman would have experienced in her day, and she comes to Jesus looking for something different. And so, in the Gospel of Mark chapter 7, beginning at verse 24, we get the account of Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman. And so Mark records this for us in verse 24. It says, Jesus then left that place and went to the region, to the vicinity of Tyre and Sidon. Outsider. He, that's Jesus, entered a home and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an evil spirit came and fell at Jesus' feet. Now the woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia, outsider. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. Jesus says, first let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs. Seems like an insulting statement. We're going to come back to that. Yes, Lord, she replied, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed, and the demon was gone. Okay, so a little conversation about children and dogs. Seems like an offensive statement that Jesus is saying there. But if using sort of the metaphors of the day, children would have been, using that metaphor, So it's the insiders, the family, those who gather at the table. Children would have brought that imagery to mind in whatever culture you were in. The dogs are the outsiders, those kind of not belonging to the group, not welcome perhaps at the table. The children at the table, the dogs, the outsiders, the ones not welcome at the table, would have been a metaphor used probably in several cultures at the time. And so what Jesus is doing here probably is not insulting the woman and her family. Jesus probably, in fact, is creating a new reality using the metaphors of the day where the unwelcomed outsider is now welcomed at the table. Jesus is probably creating a new reality for this woman where he's not offending her by calling her a dog in any way. He's creating a new reality where dogs perhaps weren't thought of to be welcomed at the table, where now there's a place at the table. And so not only is this Greek woman, she doesn't seem to be insulted at Jesus's comment. Notice what her response is. She says, "Yes, Lord." Now, this may just be a courteous response, "Yes, Lord," to Jesus, but perhaps it's significant. This is the only time in the Gospel of Mark that Jesus is called Lord. It's the only time in the Gospel of Mark, and it's by an outsider. It's by a woman. It's by a Greco-Syrian, Phoenician, Sidon, and Tyre woman. Outsider, outsider, outsider. And I wonder perhaps if Mark isn't making a point in his gospel that Jesus, he hasn't just come for the religious insiders. He's come for those outside. He's come for those who aren't, he's come for the margins. That's why the Messiah has come into the world, for both the insider and the outsider. And what's true, whether we realize it or not, we're all outsiders. We're all looking for crumbs from the table of Jesus. And so notice this woman, her response, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Perhaps her response has the weight of something like this: "Jesus, I'll take any seat at your table. I'll take any spot at your table." It seems to be the response of the faith of this woman as she comes to Christ. She comes to Jesus. And you'll notice in the text how Jesus heals this woman's daughter, in contrast to the spiritualists, the mediums, the healers of that day. Jesus, just with a word, in a home, speaks these words to this woman. He then told her, "For such a reply you may go, the demon has left your daughter." He doesn't make a spectacle of it. He doesn't even go to her home. With a word, Jesus restores this woman's daughter. And then Mark makes this point, as he does in a number of places: she went home right away. Now, Jesus has a tendency, he has a pattern throughout all the Gospels. He usually sends people home after restoring has happened. After he's restored spirit, mind, body, whatever the ailment, whatever the brokenness is, Jesus oftentimes sends people home. There's often a movement toward a home, isn't there? And I wonder if there's an emphasis of the gospel writers as we think about our faith in Jesus, that the temple, it cannot be the primary home for our faith in Jesus. The temple is important as we gather up around the table, around the altar, around the body and blood of Christ to hear God's word and receive him in the sacrament. But the temple can't be primarily home for our faith, can it? Home has to be home for our faith. And I wonder if Mark here in this part of his gospel, as in other parts of his gospel, and the other gospel writers do this too, kind of asking the question, who or what is Lord of your home? You know, is our faith primarily residing in the temple, sort of with our outside actions? Or has it made its way home? Home into our heart, for sure, but actually into our homes. Who or what is kind of Lord of our homes? And all the way back in the Old Testament, in Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, Joshua challenges the people in his generation and in the generation after. In Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, Joshua asks a home question. He says, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to your home, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your forefathers served beyond the river, the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Me and my house, first and foremost, it is come home. We will serve the Lord. And so maybe a question to kind of consider in this encounter between Jesus and this woman as Jesus restores her daughter and sends her home is maybe to just kind of consider this. Who is Lord of your home? And as we kind of think about that, what does life look like when Jesus is Lord of the home? And when Christ is Lord of the home, what does that kind of look like? If we were to kind of lean into the words of Jesus, it might not be a whole lot of outside stuff. It might first and foremost be shaping our hearts, it might be shaping our home. I ran across a section by one of my favorite writers, R.C. Sproul is his name. He's a Reformed writer. Okay, fine. He's not Lutheran, sort of, in who he is, and I think that's okay. But he wrote this in one of his writings, and I thought this might be helpful. Connects with the reading today. Dr. Sproul writes, "Christians have nothing to be smug about. We are not righteous people trying to correct the unrighteous. We're just one beggar telling another where to find bread." We're just one beggar after another trying to help people find bread. And for we who know Jesus as Lord, it's Jesus. It's in Jesus that we find the bread of life. So we're not better than anybody. We're not more righteous than anybody. We're not more clean than anybody. We're still trying to work on our hearts too, or rather Christ by his Spirit is working on our hearts. We're beggars just like everybody else. But the difference is we know where to find bread. And it's in Jesus, the bread of life. And so, brothers and sisters, that you're reminded again this morning that it's in Jesus you have life, that it wouldn't just be outward actions. It wouldn't just be outward appearances. It doesn't mean we're better. It means we're beggars just like the rest of the world. The difference meaning that Christ has made his way into our hearts. It's made his way into our homes. Because it's then that life changes. And so that you'd rest in that you'd lean into that Christ is Lord of your life, as Lord of your homes, that you would know that peace that passes all understanding found only in Jesus Christ. And that would be true of your home today and all your days. And so as Christ is Lord of your life, that light would shine out into the world as your life is awesome in the lives of others. Go be awesome this week as you go in peace and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.